That Rolls-Royce is mine. She's just a junk picker who dragged it out of a scrapyard to look important. The HOA president snatched the keys from the small grease-stained woman and raised them before the cameras. This is Maple Estate, not a mechanic's slum. Go wipe off the mess you made, sweetheart. Laughter burst from the crowd. Someone threw a rag at her feet. The woman bent down, picked it up, her face, calm eyes unreadable. She tapped her phone once. The massive LED screen behind them flickered alive. Registered owner Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, 1906, Maris Elwood. Silence crashed over the crowd. The car they mocked as junk was her inheritance, and the self-proclaimed owner had just committed grand theft on live television. Maris Elwood stood there, her hands steady, the rag still in her grip. She didn't say a word. The camera zoomed in, catching the faint smudge of grease on her cheek, the plain cotton shirt tucked into faded jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry. The crowd expected her to shrink, to run, to cry, but she just folded the rag, tucked it into her pocket, and walked away. The HOA president, Delora Winthorpe, stood frozen, the keys dangling in her hand like a guilty verdict. Nobody laughed now. Maris's steps echoed on the pavement, each one a quiet rebuke. The screen still glowed behind them, her name in bold letters undeniable. 6 months earlier, Maris had rolled that rusted Rolls-Royce into her small garage at Maple Estate. The car was a wreck, peeling paint-cracked windows, tires flat as pancakes. Neighbors peered over their manicured hedges, smirking. One guy, a hedge fund bro in a polo shirt, leaned against his mailbox and snorted. "What's that, your new lawn ornament?" His wife, all highlights and yoga pants, giggled behind her iced coffee. Maris didn't look up. She was under the hood, her hands already black with grease checking the engine block. The car groaned like an old man waking up. She patted it gently like she was calming a horse. The neighbors didn't see that. They saw a woman who didn't belong dragging junk into their pristine world. Delora Winthorpe, the HOA president, was the first to make it official. She marched over her heels, clicking like gunfire, and slapped a letter on Maris's mailbox. "This is a warning," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "That pile of scrap is an eyesore. It's against regulations." Maris wiped her hands on her jeans, read the letter, and nodded once. "I'm fixing it," she said, her voice soft but clear. Delora laughed a sharp barking sound. "Fixing it, honey? You're not a mechanic. You're barely a resident." A couple of neighbors watching from their porches snickered. Maris folded the letter, slid it into her pocket, and went back to work. The hood clanged shut behind her. Delora didn't stop at just a letter. A week later, a heavy official-looking truck with municipal markings idled outside Maris's property. A man in a high-visibility vest, claiming to be from the city's public nuisance department, walked straight past Maris working in the garage. He didn't introduce himself. He just produced a clipboard and began loudly criticizing the state of her tools and the safety of the workspace, pointing out non-existent fire hazards and improper solvent storage. Maris watched him, her hand gripping a rag, observing the way his eyes kept darting nervously toward Delora's house across the street. The inspector then took a can of bright orange spray paint from his truck, walking toward the Rolls-Royce's frame, claiming he had to mark it for mandatory removal due to structural instability. This was the line. Maris dropped the rag. She walked slowly toward the man, her boots scuffing the concrete, and stopped 3 feet away. Her unreadable gaze settled on the name badge pinned slightly crookedly to his chest. She didn't raise her voice, but the sudden silence in the air felt heavy. "The only non-compliant object here," she said, her voice a low, steady murmur, "is that badge. The Public Nuisance Department uses light blue vests, and their inspection forms are watermarked. You're trespassing." The man swallowed hard, his face losing color, and he retreated faster than his truck could pull away, leaving the intended act of vandalism unfinished. The next day, someone snapped a photo of Maris, scraping rust off the car's fender. It landed in the Maple Estate Clean Living Group chat with a caption, "She thinks this is a junkyard." The comments piled up fast. "Who let her move in? Bet she's squatting. Look at those clothes. Goodwill reject." But Maris didn't have a phone that buzzed with notifications. She didn't see the posts. But she felt the stares when she walked to the corner store, the whispers when she passed the community pool. One woman, a real estate agent with perfect nails and a fake smile, called out, "Sweetie, there's a car wash down the road. You're welcome." Maris paused, looked at her and said, "Thanks, I'm good." The woman's smile faltered and Maris kept walking. At the HOA meeting that month, Delora made it a spectacle. She stood at the podium, her pearls gleaming, and pointed at Maris in the back row. "This young lady thinks she can turn our neighborhood into a chop shop," she said. The room chuckled. A guy in a blazer, some tech startup hotshot, leaned over to his buddy and muttered, "What's she even doing here? She looks like the help." Maris sat still, her hands folded in her lap. When Delora asked if she had anything to say, Maris pulled a photo of the Rolls-Royce's frame from her bag and said, "It'll run again." Delora smirked. "Sure it will. And I'll be the next Miss America." The room roared. Maris sat down, her face unchanged, and slipped the photo back into her bag. One evening, Maris was in her garage, the Rolls-Royce's engine spread out like a puzzle on her workbench. She tightened a bolt, her fingers precise, when a sticky note appeared on her door. "No mechanic work allowed." It was signed by the HOA. She peeled it off, read it, and set it on her workbench. Then she kept working. The next morning, a man in a security vest was at her gate, sent by Delora. "Ma'am, you need to stop," he said, his voice bored. "This is a residential area." Maris looked up, her wrench still in hand. "I'm in my garage," she said. He blinked, shifted his weight, and left. That night, the group chat lit up again. "She's defying the HOA now. Who does she think she is?" Gareth Vaughn, the real estate lawyer who lived 3 houses down, saw something the others didn't. He was at Maris's gate one morning, pretending to check his mail, when he noticed the car's license plate, V1906. It wasn't just old, it was rare, the kind of plate you'd see on a museum piece. He squinted, snapped a photo, and went home to dig. An hour later, he found it. The plate was tied to a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud from a private collection owned by the Eliam Crest Heritage Trust. Gareth knew the name. Everyone in the car world did. He leaned back in his chair, staring at his laptop. Maris wasn't just fixing some junker. She was working on a piece of history. Maris didn't talk about it. She didn't talk much at all. But Gareth remembered her from high school, back when they were kids in a small town far from Maple Estate. She was quiet then too, always tinkering with her dad's old truck, her hands stained with oil even at 16. He remembered her showing him a carburetor, once explaining how it worked with a patience most teachers didn't have. Now watching her scrub rust off that Rolls-Royce, he saw the same focus. He tried to ask her about it one day, catching her at the mailbox. "That car's something special, isn't it?" he said. Maris glanced at him, her eyes sharp for a second, then softening. "It's just a car," she said, but her hand lingered on the mailbox like she was guarding something. The HOA's annual gala was where things got ugly. Delora had turned the community center into a glittering showcase, chandeliers, catered shrimp string quartet in the corner. Maris showed up in a plain black dress, no makeup, her hair in a simple braid. People stared. A woman in a sequined gown, some influencer with 1 million followers, whispered to her friend, "Did she get lost on the way to a funeral?" The friend laughed loud enough for Maris to hear. Delora took the stage, her smile sharp as a knife, and called Maris up. "Let's give a hand to our resident mechanic," she said, her voice syrupy. "Maybe she can tell us why our streets smell like a garage." The room erupted in laughter. Maris stood there, her hands clasped in front of her. She didn't flinch. Delora kept going. "Seriously, Maris, what's with that rust bucket? You think you're restoring a classic, or just playing dress-up?" A man in a tux, a car dealer who bragged about his Porsche, tossed a greasy rag onto the stage. "Here, you forgot this," he called. The crowd howled. Maris bent down, picked up the rag, and looked at him. "You drive a leased car," she said, her voice even. "I own mine." The room went quiet. The man's face turned red. Maris handed the rag to Delora and walked off the stage, her steps slow and deliberate. The next day, she slapped a $20,000 fine on Maris for unauthorized mechanical activity. The notice was taped to her door, bright red, impossible to miss. Neighbors gathered, snapping photos, posting them online with captions like, "Finally some justice." Maris read the notice, folded it, and went back to her garage. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't argue. She just kept working. That night, she pulled an old photo from her toolbox, a faded picture of a man in a suit standing next to a gleaming Rolls-Royce. She touched the edge of the photo, then set it back down. The car in the picture looked a lot like the one in her garage. The $20,000 fine felt less like a threat and more like a definitive challenge, a physical manifestation of Delora's arrogance. Maris did not waste time researching lawyers or drafting rebuttals. Instead, she took the fine notice, carefully removed the tape, and pinned it up on the garage wall right above her soldering station. Then she went back to the workbench and meticulously pulled out a set of old heavy-duty micrometers and precision depth gauges. Over the next 48 hours, she worked on a section of the car's undercarriage, not fixing a fault, but deliberately machining a custom-fitted inspection panel out of aerospace-grade aluminum, a material far superior to the original steel. This new panel, once bolted into place, contained a small sealed compartment. Inside this compartment, Maris placed a certified tamper-proof flash drive containing dozens of high-resolution, geolocated and notarized photographs documenting every stage of the Rolls-Royce's repair, all stamped with irrefutable metadata. This wasn't evidence for court. It was insurance. It was her quiet statement that she had been documenting their every move, and her counterattack was not going to be a legal threat, but an operational certainty. Gareth couldn't let it go. He started asking questions quietly through his contacts in the car world. He found out the Elliam Crest Trust wasn't just a collector's group. It was a gatekeeper for some of the rarest vehicles in the world, and they'd been looking for someone to restore that exact Rolls-Royce. Gareth saw an email in a form buried deep. The trust had hired an anonymous mechanic to test their skills. No name, no credentials, just results. He looked out his window at Maris's garage, the lights still on at midnight, and knew she wasn't just fixing a car. She was proving something. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and professional alarm, Gareth couldn't shake the knowledge that the Elliam Crest Trust was involved. He ventured into Maris's garage late one afternoon, ostensibly to ask for advice on a sticky garage door, but really to search for confirmation. Maris was busy organizing tiny screws into labeled compartments, her back turned. Gareth's eyes drifted to the workbench, where she had been working on the engine block. There, tucked almost invisibly beneath a layer of protective canvas, was a small lead-stamped seal. It was the kind of customized proprietary quality control marker used only by a handful of elite automotive restoration firms globally, and the distinctive crest on this particular seal was the private mark of the Elliam Crest Trust's engineering division. It was not a mass-produced decal. It was a physical testament that this car and the work being done on it was sanctioned at the absolute highest level. Gareth felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He didn't just know she was working for them. He realized she was working at their standard, perhaps even setting their standard. He mumbled a hasty goodbye, leaving Maris still and silent among her tools, knowing he was standing next to a quietly operating genius. The humiliation kept coming. One morning, Maris found her garage door spray-painted Junkyard Queen. She stared at it, her jaw tight, then grabbed a can of paint and covered it up. Neighbors watched, whispering. A woman in designer sunglasses, the kind who hosted charity galas but never donated, leaned over her fence. "You know, Maris, you could just move. This isn't your kind of place." Maris paused, paint roller in hand, and looked at her. "Funny," she said. "I thought this was my home." The woman blinked, then walked away, her heels sinking into the grass. Maris kept painting her strokes steady until the door was clean again. The atmosphere in Maple Estate had curdled into outright hostility, a collective effort to eject the unwanted element. The intimidation culminated one Saturday when Maris attempted to back the Rolls-Royce out of her driveway for a short diagnostic run. The engine had been rebuilt and needed testing. As she slowly reversed a spontaneous human chain formed at the end of her driveway, 3 neighbors, including the tech hotshot and the influencer, stood shoulder to shoulder, their arms linked, smirking in silent defiance. They had placed trash cans and potted plants to block the street, entirely turning her private driveway into a cul-de-sac of public scorn. Maris stopped the car, the rebuilt engine idling perfectly, a beautiful muted rumble that contradicted the chaos around her. The crowd expected her to plead or retreat. Instead, she simply kept her foot on the brake, the glare from the sun catching the still dull chrome, and waited. The silence stretched the 3 figures standing like arrogant sentinels until a siren wailed in the distance. Maris didn't move. The influencer was the first to look away, breaking the chain, realizing the absurdity of standing guard over a residential street as a police car approached on an unrelated call. The moment their human wall dissolved, Maris smoothly shifted into drive and pulled the Rolls-Royce back into the sanctuary of her garage, never having spoken a single word, leaving the neighbors to awkwardly scatter and retrieve their trash cans. Then came the day the car disappeared. Maris woke up to an empty garage, the door wide open to tire tracks leading out. She stood there, her hands in her pockets, staring at the empty space. Delora was on the local news by noon, standing in front of the Rolls-Royce, now parked in the HOA's gated lot. This vehicle was abandoned, she said, her voice smooth as silk. We took it to protect our community's image. The reporter nodded, eating it up. Maris watched the broadcast on her neighbor's TV, her face blank. She didn't call the police. She didn't scream. She just picked up her phone and sent a text. One text. The single text Maris sent wasn't an SOS to a lawyer or the police. It was a coded notification to the Elliam Crest Trust's chief security officer, a man named Colonel Vance. Maris's message contained 2 words, V-1906, compromised. Within 70 seconds, Colonel Vance initiated a protocol that bypassed local law enforcement entirely. Utilizing the car's hidden GPS-linked tracking beacon, a device Maris herself had installed weeks prior, anticipating this exact scenario, the Trust's remote security operations team pinpointed the Rolls-Royce to the HOA's locked yard. They didn't call Delora. They contacted the state attorney general's office, presenting the documented irrefutable evidence of the vehicle's status as a protected heritage asset and Delora's action as felonious interference. The resulting police escort that returned the car wasn't a favor. It was a legal and professional obligation executed by state authorities under strict instruction. When the police cruiser arrived at Maple Estate to release the vehicle, the officers didn't speak to Delora or her staff. They handed the keys directly to Maris, who was already waiting at her garage door, the empty space now filled instantly and silently by the magnificent machine. Gareth was in his office when his phone buzzed. It was a forwarded email from Maris. No message, just a file. He opened it, photos of Delora's security team towing the Rolls-Royce, time-stamped clear as day. He forwarded it to a contact at the Elliam Crest Trust, his hands shaking. Within hours, a black SUV pulled up to Maris's house. 3 people got out, 2 men in suits, 1 woman with a clipboard. They didn't knock. They went straight to the garage, looked at Maris's tools, her workbench, the half-finished parts laid out in perfect order. One of them took a photo of a gasket she'd machined herself. They didn't say much, just nodded and left. The next morning, the Trust showed up unannounced. A man in a tailored coat, probably from some museum board, walked into Maris's garage with a camera. Maris was under the car, her car returned overnight by police escort after Gareth's email. She slid out, wiped her hands, and started the engine. The Rolls-Royce roared to life, smooth and deep, like it had just rolled off the factory line. The man's jaw dropped. He took a step back, then started snapping photos. Maris didn't smile. She just turned off the engine and went back to work. The man sent a text. She's the one. Delora's world started crumbling that afternoon. The local news ran a new story. HOA president accused of stealing historic vehicle. The Elliam Crest Trust issued a statement. Rolls-Royce Vive 1906 is the property of our heritage project. Its authorized restorer is Maris Elwood. Social media exploded. The Maple Estate group chat went silent, then frantic. Did we mess up? One neighbor posted. She's nobody, another insisted. But the evidence was everywhere, photos, documents, the Trust's letterhead. Delora's name was on every headline, and none of them were kind. Facing the crushing reality of her impending professional and legal ruin, Delora Winthorpe launched a last-ditch attempt at public sympathy. She didn't hold the emergency HOA meeting in the community center. She staged a tearful press conference on her own lawn, complete with a backdrop of perfectly blooming hydrangeas and a carefully selected distressed white linen outfit. She addressed the cameras, her voice catching with calculated sincerity, dramatically claiming that Maris had been harassing her for months and had fabricated the entire story to gain notoriety. I was just trying to protect our family values, she sobbed, holding a tissue, and this opportunistic woman, this grease-stained pretender, has ruined me. As she spoke, however, the broadcast was interrupted. The local station cut away abruptly from Delora's theatrics to an unscheduled live feed from the Elliam Crest Trust headquarters. Elliam Crest himself, sitting sternly behind a mahogany desk, was now on screen stating flatly, "The Trust is in possession of irrefutable time-stamped security footage, confirming Miss Winthorpe's direct, unauthorized manipulation of the vehicle. Any suggestion of fabrication by Miss Elwood is defamatory and will be met with immediate legal action. We stand fully behind our restorer." Delora, still mid-sob on her lawn, watched the monitor she'd set up for the press. The camera panned over to her face, capturing the precise moment her public mask shattered into raw, furious disbelief. Maris didn't watch the news. She was in her garage polishing the Rolls-Royce's grille. The car was almost done now, its curves gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Gareth stopped by, leaning against the doorframe. "You knew this whole time, didn't you?" he said. Maris looked up, her hands still on the chrome, knew what she asked, her voice light. He shook his head, grinning. "You're something else, Maris." She shrugged, went back to polishing. But her fingers lingered on the grill, tracing the lines like they were a memory. Delora tried to save face. She called an emergency HOA meeting, her voice shaking as she stood at the podium. "This was a misunderstanding," she said, her pearls catching the light. "We thought the car was abandoned." Nobody bought it. A woman in the back, the same influencer from the gala, live-streamed the whole thing, so HOA Karen's going down. Delora showed up at Maris's house the next day, a bouquet of roses in her hands, reporters trailing her. "I'm so sorry," she said, her smile tight. Maris opened the door, looked at the flowers and said, "Keep them." She closed the door. The cameras caught it all. The Eliam Crest Trust invited Maris to the National Heritage Exhibition. She drove the Rolls-Royce herself, the car purring through the city, turning heads at every light. At the event, a red velvet curtain dropped, revealing the car under spotlights. A plaque read, "Restored by Maris Elwood." The crowd applauded long and loud. Eliam Crest himself, a quiet man with gray hair and sharp eyes, shook her hand. "We watched you from the start," he said. "You didn't just fix the car, you honored it." Maris nodded, her face calm, but her hand tightened around his for a moment. Delora wasn't there. Her invitation had been revoked. The news reported she'd been fired from her consulting firm, her name dropped from every board she'd bragged about. The influencer who'd thrown the rag at the gala lost her sponsorship deal after the live stream went viral. The car dealer who'd mocked Maris was quietly blacklisted by every classic car club in the state. Nobody said Maris's name in those stories. They didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. Delora made one last desperate move. She went on a local talk show, her makeup flawless, her voice trembling with fake tears. "Maris tricked us all," she said. "She's been cozying up to Eliam Crest to get that car." The host nodded, eager for drama. Social media lit up again, from grease monkey to gold digger. One blog screamed. Maris didn't respond. She didn't need to. Delora's talk show lie, claiming Maris was a gold digger, initially caused a predictable online frenzy, but the narrative was swiftly and professionally suffocated before it could take root. Eliam Crest and the Trust didn't just issue another statement. They leveraged their massive network and influence. They purchased prime ad space on every major news site and social media platform, running a simple, elegant, full-page spread. The advertisement featured a magnificent large-format photo of Maris dressed in her mechanic's overalls, deeply focused on polishing the Rolls-Royce's engine block. The caption beneath the photo was concise and devastatingly effective. "Maris Elwood integrity is priceless. The Eliam Crest Heritage Trust stands with our master restorer." This unprecedented public defense immediately reframed the debate, transforming Delora's desperate slander into a transparent attack on a professional expert being unfairly targeted by the elite. The message wasn't for the internet trolls. It was a clear warning to the media and to Delora's remaining allies: attack Maris, and you attack the entire foundation of automotive history and wealth she now represented. The rumors died, not from neglect, but from the simple crushing weight of undeniable high-status support. At the Trust's press conference, Eliam Crest took the stage. The room was packed, reporters, car enthusiasts, even a few Maple Estate residents in the back, looking nervous. "This Rolls-Royce," Eliam said, "belongs to its restorer and its rightful owner." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Maris Elwood is the last living heir of the original Rolls-Royce founder's American branch." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Maris stood off to the side, her hands in her pockets, a small smile on her face. "I just wanted to fix the car," she said, when a reporter shoved a mic at her. The room laughed, but it was warm, respectful. The HOA was dissolved a week later. Delora faced charges for theft and defamation. Her house went up for sale, the sign crooked in her perfect lawn. In the quiet hours of that evening, after the last of her tools were packed and the garage was empty, Maris performed one last unnecessary inspection. She settled into the driver's seat of the now perfectly restored Rolls-Royce, her hand resting on the wheel, feeling the solid, cool expanse of the newly fitted leather. As she slowly pulled the V1906 out of her own driveway, she purposefully took the long way around the block. The Rolls-Royce, silent but heavy with historical gravitas, drifted past Delora Winthorpe's former residence. The for sale sign was not just crooked, it was now covered in community graffiti, cheap temporary paint scrawled with messages like "Thief" and "HOA ruined." Maris saw a single crumpled figure, Delora, sitting alone on her front porch, framed by the failing hydrangeas, staring blankly at the ruined sign and the emptiness of her manicured life. Maris did not speed up. She did not honk. She simply held Delora's gaze for a single profound moment, her eyes betraying nothing, carrying the full weight of the truth. Then, with a smooth, almost imperceptible press of the accelerator, the Rolls-Royce purred away, leaving the silent, defeated figure in its polished wake. Maris didn't watch the movers pack her things. She was in her garage packing her own tools, the Rolls-Royce parked outside, gleaming in the sun. She drove it out of Maple Estate that evening, the engine humming, the neighbors watching from their windows. Nobody waved. Nobody needed to. Her car said everything. Some folks get judged their whole lives. They stand quiet not because they're weak, but because they know their truth. Maris carried hers in every step, every turn of her wrench. She didn't need to shout it. The world saw it anyway. You've been there, haven't you? Misjudged, overlooked, but still standing. You weren't wrong. You were never alone. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.